My name is Mitch Case, and I'm with the National Arts Club. Today, we're joined by award-winning actor John Douglas Thomas and NAC member and head of the Shakespeare Guild, John Andrews, for a conversation on Shakespeare and theater. For those of you who aren't familiar with the club, we're a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. Annually, the club offers more than 150 free programs to the public, including exhibitions, theatrical, and musical performances, as well as lectures and readings. For more information about the National Arts Club, you can visit nationalartsclub.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We've set aside some time for questions at the end of today's conversation, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box, and we'll get to those at the end. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to John Andrews.
Thank you, Mitch. And now that we're together, John Thompson and I have done several programs. I think they've all been at the National Arts Club. The last one was, I think, in May of 2019, John.
Yes.
And here we are. We're 2,000 miles and 6 feet apart, I guess, today, aren't we? Well, you have done so many wonderful things over the years, and you've received so many awards and played so many wonderful roles. I'm just wondering how you're feeling about being closed off from the theater.
We talked a little bit about that a little bit earlier. It's odd, and I think I'll speak for myself, and maybe other theater artists feel the same way. When everything kind of initially started happening with COVID, and then certainly the uprisings in the streets, I really felt like I was fine not doing theater or not being a part of anything theatrical. I really felt like there was far more important things to focus on during that time. It just felt like theater was escapism. To do theater during that time was escapism, and I wanted to be connected to what was actually going on with COVID and also with the uprisings. So I didn't really miss theater. And I was actually glad to have this time to think, to participate, to be involved in other things that had nothing to do with theater. But I will say now I am missing theater, and certainly would like to get back to performing, to being on stage, to the communal experience of being backstage and on stage with other actors, performing in a play, and also the communal experience of being with an audience. Those that decide to show up to witness that evening or that matinee of a show. So yeah, I really want to get back to that, and I feel kind of fortified now with different experiences, certainly, that I want to bring to my acting. I want to bring my feelings, my emotions, what this time has meant to me, what I've seen, what I've participated in, what I've watched, what I've felt, has filled me in a way, and I would like to certainly begin to utilize that or those experiences as an actor in a play, whether it be contemporary or classical. But I am very hungry to get back on the stage and perform.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about your most recent experience, which I guess was primarily by Zoom. And that was the production of Richard II that took place with the Public Theater, along with WNYC, and it was an audio presentation of one of Shakespeare's classics. And could you tell us a little bit about how that all came about and how you felt about it?
Wow. That we were going to do Richard II in the park, and obviously it got postponed due to COVID. And so we were ready to kind of leave it at that and maybe do it next summer. And everybody was somewhat content and said, okay, we have to miss this opportunity to do it, but it's for the safety of ourselves and also New Yorkers. And there's just no possible way to do it outdoors. And then I got a phone call and said, hey, we're thinking of maybe doing it as a radio play, which at first I was a little, that's interesting. I couldn't quite see how we would do that because we still couldn't get together in the same location to actually do the taping for the radio play. But they came up with this really ingenious idea that we would do it with WNYC, and we do it with Zoom. WNYC would provide all the technical equipment, i.e. the microphones, microphone stands, recorders, and we'd rehearse on Zoom, and then we'd record with the technical equipment. We all had to find a quiet place in our apartment. For me, that was my bathroom, and I hung up, I guess, about 11 or 12 towels to soundproof my bathroom from the echoes of the tile. And that's what we did. We rehearsed for like about a week and a half. And then we started taping during the second week. And whatever retapes we had to do, we did that on the following week. So it was roughly about a 2.5 week project. And it was really interesting because it all made us technicians. We had to somewhat learn how to work with this technical equipment and at the same time act, at least with our voices, and using Zoom to connect with our fellow actors and, you know, perform the scenes. And in some ways it was a lot like a regular rehearsal, with the exception that we weren't in the same space together. So all that being said, it did start to feel like, oh, wow, we're working on a play. We're collaborating on a play. We're doing something for the first time. It's a Shakespeare play being done over the radio with American actors through Zoom, which we felt certainly had never been done before. And, you know, it really felt like we were doing something really new and interesting. And everybody kind of bought into the project. Certainly it was tough going at first because people were more involved with what's happening in the streets, what was happening with COVID. And to do Richard II seemed to be a sidebar. It just didn't seem important at the time. But then as people got into it, we gave ourselves over to the work and to the play and to the technical aspects of it, as well as the acting aspects of it. And I think there were many of us that wanted to act again. And this felt as close to acting as we were going to get, because we weren't going to get back on a main stage. So it was actually kind of fun. I was really proud of it because it was quite an accomplishment to actually pull this thing off. You know what I mean?
And you did it beautifully.
And we did it. Yeah, we did it. So I was really happy with that. I was very proud of all the acting, all the actors that worked on it, the people at WNYC. You know, it was really a major project to pull off, and we did it in 2.5, 3 weeks.
And I think from the point of view of the listener, it was just a superb production. And I think you did a great job of providing background information, the interviews that accompanied it, the plot summaries that were provided. Has the response been positive? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, I haven't fully listened to it, only because I never really listen, or I try not to listen or watch.
Yes.
I've done.
Yes.
In a way, you know, it scares me if I do, because if it's as bad as I think it is, I'll never do it again. So, but I heard some good things about it. I heard some good feedback from friends and people, other professionals that have texted or emailed that said they enjoyed it and it was really good, and you know, they were thankful. So in many respects, I think it came off pretty well.
And how did you like playing the Duke of York? Is that a role you had played before?
Yeah, you know, I'd played it before. There was a wonderful actor. Some of you may know him. His name is Jeremy Guy. God rest his soul. He passed away several years ago. And when I was at the ART in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they were going to do that play. Robert Woodruff was going to direct it. Bill Camp was playing Bolingbroke, the great Bill Camp, and then also the great Tommy Durar, who's also not with us anymore. He died about 3 or 4 years ago. He played Richard. And because Jeremy Geit was sick at the time, they asked me to fill in for him and play the Duke of York. And I was far too young. This was almost maybe 15, 16 years ago. But they asked me to fill in, and you know, I filled in for it. And I enjoyed the part when I played it then, feeling way too young to actually to do it. Jeremy Geit was at least 30 years older than me at the time. So it felt like I was just too young to be doing it, but I did enjoy it. You know, it's like, he's a fascinating character because he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Both people that are vying, the king is his nephew, Richard, who is the king, is his nephew. Bolingbroke, who is going to depose Richard eventually in the play, is also his nephew. And he's stuck between the both. He's stuck between family and trying to figure out the right thing to do. And it's a very generational play, of course. You got the younger generation that's coming up and trying to get rid of the old generation, and the old generation trying to provide some guidance to the young generation. So it was interesting. I really enjoyed playing it. I still think I'm too young, but maybe these gray hairs belie.
I think you have the chops for that role.
Okay. Well,
and it's quite a journey he takes in the play.
It is quite a journey. You know, he certainly ends up supporting his nephew, Bolingbroke, who deposes his nephew, Richard.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things that was really interesting in the play is he experiences a lot of loss. Like early on, his sister passes away. There's a scene where he's with John of Gaunt, who's his brother. His brother passes away. So a lot of his decisions or his movement forward in the play is directed by grief. You know, he doesn't even have time to grieve for the ones that he has lost. He gets thrown right into the mix and has to begin almost immediately to hit the ground running.
Right.
So hopefully, you know, if we get to do it on stage, I certainly would like to investigate that aspect of the character more. It's harder to do on radio. But certainly in a physical production, it's something that I'd like to spend some time excavating.
Yeah, he has the problem of trying to decide where his loyalties lie.
Yeah.
During a very shifting set of circumstances.
And he goes back and forth, and I certainly didn't want to make him comical in that sense of being someone who just keeps going back and forth and can't make up his mind. I wanted to make those decisions come from a place of frustration, confusion, trying to figure out best where his loyalties lie in that moment to save his own skin, to save his family. What was the best thing to do for the kingdom? But he has no contemporaries. He's the one guy that's left in the play that has no contemporaries because they've all died.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He has no people to consult with but the younger generation. So I feel by the end of the play, he just accepts what has happened. And he's a loyalist, first and foremost, and he will be loyal to whoever is the king at that time.
Even to the point of sacrificing his son.
Yeah, because his son O'Merle was a part of a plot to kill the king.
Right.
You know, so that has to be dealt with. And you know, I do feel he does go all the way to the point where, he should be killed. Take my son because he plotted your life. So there is that aspect about him. But there was also something else I wanted to explore in that region as well, as to whether O'Merle is really his son. Or because his wife, the Duchess of York, suggests within that scene, you think that this is not your son. You think that this is another man's son. She says that. It's in our recording as well. And so I wanted to explore that. Sometimes that could be a comedic moment, but what if that is true? Because then that would explain his feelings towards his son, O'Merle, supposed son, and explain why he wanted his son killed. His supposed son killed. So there's just stuff that you can explore in a physical production of a play that sometimes seems like tangents, if you will, that you can explore just to realize, okay, there's something here, there's something of value here, or you know what, it's a dead end, but explore it. And that's, you know, that's one of the things I love about physical theater, is that you can get in a room and explore these ideas to the nth degree to see where they take you or where they take the production. Obviously in the radio production, we didn't have time, and that's not something that you're going to get through the radio playing of the play.
Yes. Now the production ended up being devoted to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm wondering how that complicated, if it did, the way you handled the various roles.
You know, it was suggested early on when we started working on it. There was the idea, what's the point? Why are we working on some Shakespeare play when there's more important stuff happening in our communities, our personal communities, and our communities at large? And the only way to make this worthwhile, worth our attention, worth our energy, and worth our time commitment was to dedicate it to Black Lives Matter, to something that was bigger than us, that was bigger than the production, that spoke to the needs of the actors that were in the production. This was predominantly a Black and brown cast of Shakespeare for this Richard II radio version. And if we do it on stage in the park next year, it will look the same. Mm-hmm. So there was the impetus to dedicate it to Black Lives Matter, to make it mean something, because other than that, it was just doing a play for the sake of doing a play and doing it as a radio play nonetheless. So that gave us all a point of focus and allowed us, and our director, Sahim Ali, allowed us to bring our feelings into the room, if you will, bring our feelings into the Zoom room and let that exist for the taping of Richard II. Which was good because, you know, you didn't want to negate those feelings. You didn't want to negate those emotions. You didn't want to negate that aspect of your life because we were all plugged in. We were all plugged into the Black Lives Matter movement, as we still are. So I think it was great that we could bring that into the Zoom room. We had great discussions about it for the first 3 rehearsals. Everybody got to speak their mind about what was going on with COVID, with Black Lives Matter, where they're sitting, how they're feeling. And it was allowed to exist in the room. They held space for all of our feelings.
Yes.
And by dedicating the play to Black Lives Matter, it just gave us a point of focus.
Yes.
That I don't think we would have had otherwise.
Yes. A few weeks ago, we did a Zoom program with Jim Shapiro, who had and we talked primarily about his book on Shakespeare in a Divided America. Mm-hmm. And I was delighted when I was listening to the program to hear the comments that he made and Ariana made about how all of this somehow makes Shakespeare our contemporary. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. You know, there's always something in Shakespeare's plays. There's always a level that we in our contemporary society meet directly with his plays. His plays may be 400 years old, but they speak to our contemporary selves. Certainly, I mean, if you just broke it down and looked at the characters, you know, you have so many iconic characters within Shakespeare that teach us about our own humanity, you know. You have so many situations within Shakespeare that match the political or social or economic situation today. I mean, we've all studied Julius Caesar. We see in Julius Caesar certainly many different governments around the world, if not our own. We look at Shakespeare's history plays, we see aspects of our own government. We look at Shakespeare's romantic plays, Roman plays, we can see ourselves in them. So that's the great thing about Shakespeare. I think that's the great thing about many great writers, obviously Shakespeare being the first and foremost, is that we can always find a contemporary linchpin to the work and make it feel contemporary. So indeed, Shakespeare is indeed our contemporary, whether it's by character or whether it's by social situation. It's all been done. He's written it. And we, you know, we're gifted in the sense that we get a chance to manifest his plays in our own particular time to see how well they work and how well they speak to what's happening now.
Yes. Now you were in the Julius Caesar that took place in Central Park in 2017, wasn't it?
In what? Say what I didn't hear that.
Was that 2017?
Yeah, I think it was. Yes, it was. It was the summer of 2017. Yep.
Right.
Because the summer after that was Othello, and then this summer. Okay. Yep. 2000.
Yes. Do you like working with the public theater?
Yeah, I've done, I really have to say the best place to work in the summer, the best stage to work on, certainly in the United States
Yes.
and maybe even in the world, is Central Park, that stage doing Shakespeare in the Park. It just,
Yes.
there's no, it, there's no parallel. Because it's an experience, it's a New York City experience for the audience as much as it is for the actors. It's beautiful. You're under the stars. It just feels magical. I mean, you got the raccoons. I mean, what other stage are you going to perform on where you have, your some other principal actors being raccoons?
Very interesting.
So it's just it's a beautiful space. So I've done 2 shows out there, and I've done 1 or 2 shows inside at the public. But I also like what the public stands for. There are these new plays that they're doing. They're politically in tune. They're socially in tune. It just seems like the place for communities to gather and witness theater that could speak to their own lives, to speak to their own feelings and emotions and what's happening for them. So there's something immediately contemporary about not only Shakespeare in the Park, but the public theater.
Right. You've also done notable work at Theater for a New Audience, working with Jeffrey Horowitz and his colleagues.
Yeah. That is certainly, I consider that my collaborative partner, my collaborative home.
Yes.
Most of my classical work I've done there. Jeffrey Horowitz, at a time when I didn't think I could find work in the theater and was getting to the point where I just didn't know if I was going to be able to make it in New York and do classical theater in New York, because that's what I wanted to do. He hired me 1 year to do 2 jobs back to back, a play called Orinoco by Afra Bain, which I believe is the first play in verse by a woman, I think.
I think that's right.
Check that. Yeah. Beautiful play, Orinoco, very similar to Othello in a way. So he hired me to do that, and he also hired me to be Enobarbus in Antony and Cleopatra.
Right.
I did those 2 plays back to back, and that kind of started my classical career. Then I came back and I did an Othello, of course. I did the Scottish play, I did Tamburlaine, Doll's House and The Father, and we plan to hopefully do a production of Merchant of Venice, a co-production with the Shakespeare Theater and Tofana, hopefully next year, we'll see.
Wonderful.
Knock on wood, we hope. But yeah, I have an Aaron Arbus who I've worked with almost exclusively as a director, so I just feel like that's my go-to institution. You know what I mean?
Yes.
They do what I like, and I like what they do.
Yes. Well, I've had connections with that theater from really almost the outset of the company, and I feel just so proud of everything they've done, and particularly
Jeffrey,
of the work that you've done there.
Well, thank you. Jeffrey takes a lot of risk. I mean, he does, who would do The Father and Doll's House as a running repertory, which has never been done before, and they're by 2 particular playwrights, Strindberg and Ibsen, who were in a dialogue. They didn't necessarily like each other, but they were definitely in a dialogue together through their play. Right. So you had one play, speaking of domesticity, both plays speaking of domesticity, one favoring the woman, one favoring the man. And so to run these 2 plays, that's one of the aspects of it, but to run these 2 plays in running repertory, and we do a 5-show weekend. So let's say Friday, we do Doll's House. Then Saturday matinee, we do Doll's House again. Saturday night, we do The Father. Then Sunday matinee, we do The Father. Then Sunday night, we do Doll's House. So those people that stayed to see the double header on one day, to see The Father and Doll's House, they left with something quite special, I'd like to believe.
Yes.
Because they were seeing this dialogue of these 2 playwrights being manifested through these 2 plays with all the actors. And the way we set the stage up, that theater that Tofana has, the Polanski Shakespeare Theater, in Brooklyn is a beautiful space because it can be manipulated in
Yes,
really wonderful ways. And
I agree.
we had it in railroad style. So we had
Mhm.
audiences looking at each other while watching the play. So that was a really interesting way to do these two plays, Doll's House and The Father. And, you know,
Right.
we did Tamburlaine, and we changed the theater again to do Tamburlaine. Tamburlaine, a play that hasn't been done in a quarter century in this country, maybe over
Mhm.
25 years ago. So we do it in that space. And I think I was very proud of that production. I mean, who else as an artistic director would take on something like that? There's over 20 characters in the play. Um,
Yes.
you know, so I applaud Jeffrey's courage and his desire and his ability to do the things that other people aren't doing, particularly in the realm of classical theater.
Right.
And thank goodness that, you know, I ended up working for those guys so much, because I got opportunities that I know I just wouldn't have gotten anywhere else, because nowhere else
Yes.
would have been doing those kinds of projects, you know?
Right. Are there roles that you haven't played yet that you really want a chance to do?
Um, I really want to do three things. I'd like to do Prospero, which hopefully I'll do
Mhm.
next summer up in Boston at Commonwealth Shakespeare Theater, hopefully, if theater is going to be allowed, we'll see.
Mhm.
Um, I would also like to do Timon in Timon of Athens.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've always been interested in that. And me and Jeffrey had talked about doing that years ago. They ended up doing it, I think last year. It was in a co-production with the Shakespeare Theater. It was very
Yes.
good, but I'm interested in
Yes.
that role. Um, there's something about that role, that play kind of speaks to economies, right? In a way, like
Absolutely.
wealth and then desolate and being desolate, and how fast that can happen in one's life. And there are so many different ways you can do that given American society. There's so many ways
Yes.
you can stage something like that. It really speaks to our country and capitalism, the nature of
Yes.
capitalism, the true nature.
Yes.
Because as we see, you know, through Corona, we've seen how vulnerable it's made every institution in our society.
Yes.
So there's something about that play. There's also something about Prospero that I'd love to investigate, the idea of a man without a kingdom, of a man
Mhm.
who abdicated his kingdom because he says he worked on his arts, on his books, on mastering those arts, and let the government to his brother, and got caught up in his books and his art. And then all of a sudden his brother kicked him out, you know? So
Yes.
there's something about vengeance and revenge and control,
Yes.
and how that all happens when it's right in front of you. What do you really do when these situations that you've been pining over, when they actually present themselves to you in the flesh? What are you really going to do? Or what do you do? Or do you learn something? So those are two roles that I think I have. I've thought of King Lear as well, but I've been in almost as many King Lears as I have been in Othellos. So
Yes.
I'd like to give that play a break.
Okay.
I've,
So you'll hold off on the title role for
yeah,
another decade or so?
well, 5 years.
All right. Okay. Very
The
good.
idea is to get through the canon, then start all over again. So yeah,
Yes.
5 years.
Are there theaters you haven't worked at where you would like to work?
Yeah, you know, I was born in the UK, so I've always wanted to work in the UK. I worked at the Royal Shakespeare Company years ago, but I'd love to go back. I'd love to work at the National. Whenever I've gone to the UK, one thing I usually do more than anything else is take in a lot of theater. So
Good.
I'd love to work on West End. I'd love to work at the National. I would love to work at the Donmar Playhouse. I remember there was a time where I really wanted to work at Brooklyn Academy of Music. I wanted to work at BAM because I live in Brooklyn, and you know, every weekend I'd go to BAM, you know, buy one of those $20 tickets and sit way in the back and see great theater that was coming in from different parts of Europe and Eastern Europe and the UK. And I said, oh God, I really want to work here. That whole look of the theater with the cheap paint and, you know, the antique look that it has. I just wanted to work in that space. And then I thought I never would. And then I got into a production of Iceman Cometh with the great and too soon gone Brian Dennehy, and also the great Nathan Lane. And that production we did in Chicago, but we moved it to BAM. So BAM is off my list. That BAM's off my bucket list, but definitely West End, the National, and Donmar. Those would be like my 3 picks. In the United States, Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I've been a big fan of their work. I've been a big fan of the Stratford Festival up in Canada as well. Those are 2 places, 2 stages, 2 companies I'd like to work with because they're great. So yeah, it's pretty much
How about the Shakespeare Theater Company in Washington? Have you done work there yet?
Yeah, a while back I did a production of Richard III with Wallace Acton. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Wonderful actor, wonderful actor. He played Richard III, and I think I was like his right-hand henchman, a character by the name of Radcliffe. And they dressed us up in tight leather pants, and we walked around stage killing people. So I did that many years ago. I'd love to work back there again. And obviously, if we get to do this co-production of Merchant of Venice, where I play Shylock, I will get a chance to work down there.
Yeah, well, that sounds wonderful.
I'm crossing my fingers that happens. Shylock is a character that I played once before up at Shakespeare and Company in the Berkshires many, many years ago when I was a student up there. And I've been looking to work my way back around to Shylock for quite some time.
Have you ever been tempted to do any directing?
Yeah, and the play that I'd like to direct is King Lear, because it's multi-generational. So I can create a company of talented actors of each generation. And it's one of those plays that has more great roles in it than most plays do. Certainly most tragedies do. There's a lot of good roles in King Lear. There are no small roles, you know what I mean? There's a lot of really nice roles in King Lear. I'd also like to direct Richard III, but that's like one of Shakespeare's earlier plays, so it's almost like an opera. So I'd have to find the right person to play Richard III. I'd probably try to direct a woman as Richard III.
Interesting.
I think that would really be very interesting. A woman as Richard III and a woman as Bolingbroke. And another production I'd like to direct or certainly be in and maybe direct as well, would be a production of Richard II, even though I did a radio play of one, but I've been really thinking about doing a production of Richard II and switching the characters of Richard and Bolingbroke on a night-by-night basis. Those 2 characters.
That could be very interesting.
Yeah, because you get two different perspectives of the play. Actually, you get 4. You get 4, actually, right? And so I want to do that. But I understand those things are kind of hard to do, particularly now. Who knows when something like that can ever be done, because that's an expensive proposition. It's like double rehearsal time. You know what I mean? It's an expensive proposition, a lot of people. And I think when we do get back to theater, it's going to be those smaller productions. You know, I did a production of Satchmo, and maybe I'll get a chance. I'd love to do that again. That's a 1-person show, really requires very little. And I'd love to do that. And I think when theater does pick back up, they will be doing, hopefully, those small shows, 2, 3 characters, 4 max, you know what I mean? Break-in period, if you will, before moving on to bigger productions when people feel safe.
Has there been anything about this period that you have found positive? Are there things that we're doing now that you think we might not have thought of had we not been confronted with the crises that we're dealing with at the moment?
Well, I certainly think on a personal level, what's been interesting, and certainly for me, is just spending this time thinking, meditating. You know, there has been a pause in all of our lives, so to speak, to kind of think about what's important, maybe what's not important.
Yes.
What you were doing prior to COVID and what you should be or want to be doing post-COVID or moving towards post-COVID. Certainly all the issues that have happened with the social uprising that's happening in the streets, I think that's all really good, because at the end of the day, we have to, as a country, deal with racism.
Yes.
COVID exposed it. Pardon?
We can't remain the same. We have to change.
We can't. We have to change. And you can sense that that is working, and we're moving towards something else because we have to. And the understanding of what COVID exposed our society as, and allowing us the time, because we weren't doing anything or going anywhere, to actually witness it, watch what's going on TV, participate what's happening in the streets, because we had the time to do all this stuff, to get involved, to understand, to bring ourselves to a place where we can say, we can do better, we can be better, we have to be better. So I don't know, I feel very hopeful. There was a point in time where I wasn't hopeful. I was feeling quite despondent, and that was as soon as COVID hit and the whole thing with George Floyd. I felt extremely despondent, and theater was pointless, meaningless. I've certainly come back around. I've gone around the horn. I've come back around. Theater is meaningful. It's something I want to get back to do, but I also want to be doing it in a new environment. I hope the environment that I end up doing theater in is much more of an equitable environment. Yes. So I'm all for this kind of top-down integration. I want boards to be integrated, like executive management at the theaters to also be integrated and diverse and have more Black and brown representation. So if what's happening brings just that about in our industry of the arts, in our industry of theater, that will be a blessed movement. That will be something really wonderful. But I think hopefully that will happen in all industries, you know, and maybe the arts industry will be the leaders in that. Who knows? I don't know, but I know the time for change is upon us, and we have reached an inflection point, and something must be done. We are living in this kind of a new world, and day by day it's being reshaped right in front of our own eyes. It's quite fascinating. And I feel as an inheritor, by virtue of being an artist, that I will get to manifest those feelings on a stage. That I will be somewhat a participant in this movement by performing in theater that is about this time, that reflects on this time.
Have you been involved in any political activism? And would that interest you?
Yes, that interests me. I tend to, you know, it's really funny. I feel like once Obama was out of office and Hillary Clinton did not win that election, I felt we all became activists, almost by default, certainly many of us in the arts. And when we did that production of Julius Caesar in the park, we were activists. Whether we wanted to be or not, we were activists. And I certainly admired being in that position, and am looking to do more. And I also, you know, when I was younger and I started doing Shakespeare, the fact that I was an African-American actor standing on a stage, doing Shakespeare, playing good roles, that was almost revolutionary. That was a part of my own personal activism. Now more are doing it, don't get me wrong. My whole idea was, well, if I do it, others will. If I do it and audiences see that here it is, it's done, then that opens the door for many others. And I stand on the shoulders of many others that came before. But
Yes.
just by virtue, by that virtue, I ended up being somewhat of an activist. And I'd love to see the day where, like, just because we have a play that's African American or African Americans on stage, that doesn't have to represent activism, that is normal.
Of course.
That's
Yes.
normal. That's just a
Yes.
normality. But we're not there, right? We're not
Yes.
there. Not in our institutions, not in what we see. So we have a ways to go. So I think just by virtue, once again, by me being an artist and participating in the arts, that is an aspect of my social and political
Yes.
activity.
But you wouldn't be interested in running for political office, I take it.
No, I don't think I could do that. I
Yeah.
don't think so. No.
That way madness.
Plus, I was born in the UK. I'll go to the UK and get involved in
Yes.
that politics.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
You know, I know that there are people watching who would probably love to pose a few questions. And I'm wondering if this would be a good time to ask Mitch to bring a few other people into the dialogue. Mitch?
Great, yeah, happy to do that. We've had a lot of great questions coming in.
Good.
So let me take a look here. And some of these you may have touched on already, but I think they are worth re-asking. The first question is from Anthony, and you've talked about your recent performance using Zoom and other virtual technologies, and he's just wondering what your suggestions for actors or directors performing in this format would be.
Wow. I will first say, Anthony, great question. I don't like it. I don't like performing. Not that I don't like it. It's not comfortable for me. I haven't found an ease within doing that because the nature of theater is so collaborative, right? We all need to be in the same space. We need to see each other, touch each other. You know, we need to, there's a physicality that's kind of necessary or that gets evoked when you're in the same space and working on things, which you can't really have in Zoom because you're in another location and there's a time delay, there's a lag. So it's quite difficult. But what I would offer up is to surrender. I'm in this process of just trying to surrender to Zoom. And what I mean by that is just accept it for what it is. It was really built as a telecommunication device for businesses and company to talk with each other or have meetings. It wasn't really built for what it is that we do theater, but somehow there are some aspects of it that can enhance what we do. There's an intimacy that can be achieved through it. So I think by surrendering to this technical form, which is what I'm trying to do and stop complaining about it, that we can really find something useful in it. And I think there are a lot of wonderful innovators, people that are out there writing stuff for Zoom or figuring out how to direct a play or a reading better with Zoom, with different backdrops, different, you know, maybe people being in profile as opposed to direct in camera. There are a lot of different things that are actually happening. People are pushing the envelope. So it's not going to go away. We're going to be dealing with Zoom and acting on Zoom or doing readings on Zoom or formats like this for the foreseeable future. I think now that people have discovered it, it's going to stay with us. So I say to you and other actors out there, just surrender to it and maybe something good can come from it.
Thank you. I think that's useful advice for everyone these days.
Yeah. Stop fighting it. Stop fighting Zoom. Stop fighting Zoom.
It's going to be here for a while.
Yeah.
And then we have a question here from Maureen, and her question is, what is your favorite play by Shakespeare, as well as favorite role, and why?
Oh, wow. Good question as well. Ooh, wow. It's really hard to pick a favorite because they're all good. I like to think all the ones that I've been able to participate in are good plays. I'd have to go with the two plays that I've done or worked on the most. And those two plays would be Othello and King Lear. I've obviously liked the role of Othello because I think it's one of the most demanding, it's one of the most beautiful, demanding roles in the English speaking canon for sure. And complex roles. So that being said, that's why it's one of my favorites. And I've been fortunate to have worked on it several times. And then the other play would be King Lear. And King Lear is just fascinating because for me, because it's multi-generational. And it speaks so much to the issues that come up in multi-generational plays, the old versus the young. What function do our elders have in our lives? What function does youth have in lives? Should we sit back and listen, or should we take what we feel is ours? I just love those questions because that's what we're dealing with on just a human basis all the time. You know, when is it right for me to rise up and take what's mine? Do I need to just hang back and learn from those that are in front of me or those that are older than me before I take what I feel is mine, or do I just go for it? So I like exploring that aspect of my own humanity and certainly of others. So those would be the two plays.
Thank you. And then we have a question here from Ash, who is actually playing the role of Lady Macbeth next week in a Zoom performance. And she's asking if you could tell us about your time playing Macbeth and what choices did you make in terms of the relationship between him and Lady Macbeth?
Oh, and very interesting. That's a play I don't want to do a second time. Not because it's not a great play, but it's dark, you know, in some aspects. And it's a difficult place to live for the length of a run. But anyways, what I was trying to work on when we did the Scottish play here in New York with Tafana several years ago, me and Annika Boris played Lady M, was that relationship. I kept thinking that they were, if Romeo and Juliet had grown up and had not died, this is who they, you know, they had that kind of relationship. They may have grown to what the Scottish king and queen are. And what I mean by that is that they have a profound and deep love for one another. And what I wanted to try to do in that play, in our production, and I don't know if I was successful, was for Lady M and Mr. M to be there throughout the whole play and be on each other's side for as long as possible. Oftentimes in that play, you know, once the whole thing is done, then Lady M turns on Mr. M or Mr. M turns on Lady M. I just wanted to keep the love and the support and the nurturing of our relationship for as long as possible. And where I mean, keep it all the way to when Mr. M says tomorrow, tomorrow, and tomorrow. That's the only time that he gives up on her or that she gives up on him speaking. So I just didn't want to be in a situation where Mr. M was upset with Lady M and removed her from his life, or the same thing with Lady M removing Mr. M from her life. So there wasn't this idea of they were just going at each other. They were two people in over their heads in a serious consequence. And what they needed to do, as opposed to separating from each other, they needed to rely on each other, because that's all they had to try to get through this incredible situation that they put themselves in by what they did. And the only way to do that was to remain together for as long as possible, as opposed to attacking each other and separating early in the play. So that's the only advice that I could give as it relates to the relationship. Hang in there with each other for as long as you possibly can, because all you have is each other to try to figure this thing out and get out of it. And once you attack each other and turn on each other, then the play's actually over real soon. So that's all I can say about the relationship. Hopefully that means something.
Thank you. And then, so during your conversation with John, diversity and equity in theater came up several times. And the question from Danny is if you would mind telling us a little bit about your personal experience as a Black actor who performs from a classical canon.
Well, I always feel that oftentimes I may be the only, or maybe one of two, possible three brown or Black people in the room, and that I often may be working for organizations that don't have someone who looks like me on their boards or in their executive management. And sometimes that just, it makes me feel a particular way where I don't know if I'm going to be fully supported, or I don't know if I'll be fully valued, or I don't know if my ideas or thoughts will be fully supported. So sometimes that's how it kind of hits me. I work for an organization, and then I walk through that organization and I don't see anybody else who looks like me in the organization. I'm just a jobbed-in actor. And that puts me in an asymmetrical relationship with the institution. We can't be on equal ground because I can't find myself represented in any other place but on the stage of that institution. And like I said, I'm a jobbed-in actor. I'm only there for 2 months, maybe 3 if I'm lucky, then I'm gone. So that's kind of how it's always hit me. And every time, it always happens. I mean, not all the time, but more often than not. And so what I'd like to see is that not to be the situation. I'd love to walk into a situation, see a lot of brown and Black people, obviously working there as actors. But then as I walk through that institution or run into people or go to functions for that institution, I'd like to see their board being Black and brown, or more Black and brown representation on the board, and also in the executive management. That would make me feel valued. That would make me feel taken care of. That would make me feel supported. So that's kind of how it's hit me as far as racism. Not being able to see yourself. I mean, I got into acting because I went to a play at Yale Rep and I saw Joe Turner's Come and Gone, and it was a stage full of Black and brown actors. And it immediately, although I had not done theater, it immediately made me feel valued as an audience member, valued enough to say, I think I want to be an actor. That looks like what it is I want to do. And I went into this business thinking that a lot of things within theater would look the same way that I saw this August Wilson play. Obviously, that wasn't the case. It was a big surprise to me to realize, oh, wow, that's the exception. That's not the rule. And then as I started working at institutions, yeah, me being there as an actor was an exception, not the rule. Me looking at their boards and seeing there was predominantly a white board was the rule, not the exception. Me seeing no Blacks or brown people in executive management was the rule, not the exception. So I'd love to come to a place where that doesn't need to happen, where I don't need to take the walk through the institution to see that.
John, has it occurred to you to start a company, to
yeah,
be a producer?
I've had many ideas of starting a company. The first play I do would be King Lear. But yeah, I've thought of starting a company, a very diverse company, and just picking one play and seeing how it goes, and then maybe building from there. But I do think that that's something that I would like to do. Not right now, of course, but it's on my bucket list.
I think that would be a major contribution, very much something to do.
Thank you. I'd like to, yeah, that's certainly, hopefully that's in the stars.
Good.
So thank you for sharing your, thank you for sharing your experience. I think we have time for a few more questions here. And we have one from Joe. And his question is, do you approach a role by Strindberg, August Wilson, or Shakespeare the same? Or is the acting process different?
I think I heard your question. If I approached Shakespeare, August Wilson, Chekhov, Strindberg the same, or if there's different. To be honest with you, I approach it very much the same. Acting is acting is acting. I do find that there are volumes of resources and material for Shakespeare because it's been around for so long. So there are so many books. There's just reams and reams of things you can read and research, and sometimes a little bit more than other playwrights. But as far as how I approach it and how I approach working on it, it's the same. And I will say this much, rehearsal means a great deal to me because that's the place where I can fail, because it's only through all that aspect of failure can I find something. So the idea of repetition, which rehearsal gives me, allows me to find something because I never quite know what it is I'm looking for. The play just gives me some sort of a skeleton as to what it's about and maybe what the character's about and what the situations are. They're essentially just words on a page. It's me getting up on my feet, bringing in my ideas, trying things out that ends up fleshing out a character. And then you start working with things and working with your scene partner or the story itself. And you start to find the character, find your journey in the play, find the larger ideas that the play is actually about. But ultimately, the work is the same. But I'm a rehearsal fanatic. I like the rehearsal because I need a lot of time to figure things out. I need a lot of rehearsal time to fail. So.
Did Beckett say, fail, fail again, fail better?
Yeah, that's my process. There it
Yes.
is. In
Yes,
like 7 words. Fail,
Yeah.
fail again, fail better. Absolutely, in 5 words. I like that. That's going to be my moniker.
There we go. All right. Mitch?
Great. And 2 more questions here I want to try to get to. The first is from James, and his question is, when theater does resume, how different do you think the playing space will be? And are you worried that it will become physically restrained?
Great question. I am worried that it could be difficult for actors as well as audience. Until we get a vaccine, until we have therapeutics that are efficient and easy to get to and easily administered, theater is going to have to be constructed in a weird way. The social distancing that's going to happen inside theaters and getting to theaters and waiting to get in theaters is going to have an impact on audience members. How actors move around in the theater, particularly backstage, is also going to have some kind of new protocols to it. So I think it can be very difficult. I do not think it can't be done, and I do not think that we shouldn't do theater because the protocols that are going to be levied in trying to do theater is going to make it difficult. No, we should still move forward because theater is I think it's culturally vital. We just have to find a different way to do it. I think we'll have different kinds of seating arrangements. I saw a friend of mine, Blanca Ziska, who runs the Wilma Theater, had come up with a design to shape her theater in the round with 2 seats, and they were partitioned. Each group of 2 seats was partitioned. Each 2 seats were 6 feet apart. Then there was a partition on each side. Then the next seats and the next seats all in a circle. The theater stage was down in the middle and all the audience was all up. I thought that was a very interesting design as far as being safe. And something like that could be quite exciting for the actor to perform in, to be at the center of everything. But I do think there's going to be some sort of a partition between the stage and audience, which is going to be difficult, but that may be there for a little bit. But I think we'll work through this. And I, for one, still want to participate in that event when that happens, even though it's going to be restrictive. And I think as time goes on, it will become less and less and less restrictive, and we'll get back to what theater was prior to this. but I definitely want to participate in theater during this time. I don't want to get to post-COVID and say I never got a chance to do theater during COVID, even when theaters opened and made it permissible and made it doable, although restrictive. I don't want to be one of the actors who takes myself out of that. I want to be involved in this process and definitely involved after COVID, post-COVID.
Great, thank you. I think we're all looking forward to that post-COVID era of theater. And the last question here is from Judith, and her question is, are you participating in any other virtual performances coming up, or where can we find you next?
Hello, Judith Cooper. I know that's you. Judith, the next online thing, I don't have one. There may be some stuff with Red Bull. We've been talking about maybe this kind of exploration with the Othello text. It might be over the course of 4 particular Zoom sessions, and we'd read through excerpts of the play. Ayanna Thompson might be involved, and we talk about scenes. Ayanna Thompson, who was our Shakespeare expert, along with Jim Shapiro when we did Richard II. So that may be something I might be involved in. There's another reading of the Bacchae that I may do with Carrie Perloff, who used to be the artistic director of the ACT out in San Francisco. We worked on Hamlet together. She directed me in Hamlet at ACT about 3-4 years ago. So those are the only 2 potential things that I may do that's acting again on Zoom that I know of.
Great, thank you for that. And with that, I want to turn it back over to John Andrews for any last words.
Yes, I just want to modify Beckett and say to our treasure, succeed, succeed again, succeed better.
There you go. Okay. That will come after the fail. Those are my rehearsal. Those are my rehearsal monikers. Fail, fail again, fail better, succeed, succeed again, succeed better.
Thank you, John. You're a treasure.
Thank you very much. It's been my joy. And everybody out there, thank you very much for showing up. And hopefully we'll meet on Zoom again sometime soon, or better yet, at a theater.
Yes.
Great. But thank you to John and John. And I just want to let everyone know you can find a recording of this on the National Arts Club YouTube tomorrow morning, and you can find upcoming programs at nationalartsclub.org. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Mitch.
Bye, everyone. Take care. Thanks.
Bye now.
John. Thanks, Mitch. Okay. Bye-bye.